Hi everyone, Charles from the Food People here. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. And it's my great pleasure to welcome chef, restaurateur, author and TV presenter Julie Lin. Julie joins me to talk about her culinary journey so far. We'll talk about Scottish, Malay, mixed culinary, heritage fusion, what even is modern fusion in today's world. We'll delve into her culinary soul. We'll talk about restaurant GaGa, MasterChefs, and some really exciting upcoming projects. So Julie, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Charles. I've been a very big fan of the podcast for a long time. So it's nice to see your face with the voice that I've heard loads of times. So thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
That's brilliant. It's really good to have you here. And just a reminder for everyone listening today, at the Food People, we're very clear about why we do what we do. We're champions of change, driven every day by our intent to support industry to shift the future of food and drink by harnessing the power of trends. And this In Conversation With series is all about talking to people and brands and businesses across the spectrum of food and drink to find out more about why they do what they do, how in their way they're championing change and shifting the future of food and drink. So that's what the podcast series is all about. And Julie, it's amazing to be speaking to you today. I've been really looking forward to our chat. So let's get started.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited.
I don't know if we can just begin with some intros. You know, who are you? What do you do? And
yeah, of course.
I'm speaking to everyone from down here in Devon, but where are you talking to us from?
So I am talking to you from a rather rainy Glasgow this morning. I was just telling you before we started, it is not very nice outside today. It looks like it could be 5 p.m. at night, but that is usual for Glasgow. So I'm from Glasgow in Scotland, and my accent might give that away. And I've lived here all my life, actually, and I tend to do quite a lot of work all over the country. I've got a restaurant in Glasgow called GaGa Kitchen and Bar, as you mentioned, and do various bits and bobs of work. The multi-hyphenated career has begun, which is very nice. So yeah, feels very much privileged to come on and speak about it.
Brilliant stuff. I'd love to start by just exploring a bit about your journey to being a chef. Was it conventional? How did it come about? You know, where did your love for food come from?
Do you know, it's actually such an unconventional way, which I've always tried to be as honest as I can about, because I feel like quite a lot of these stories are often polished, but I will give you the full view here. So I actually started off a little bit unsure about what to do in life. I wasn't quite sure. I was quite musical. I actually used to be a violin and piano teacher back in the day. And I used to work in retail as well, doing HR problems and all that kind of thing. So I was quite happy in my career. I wasn't in any way kind of really, really upset or unhappy with where I was. I just used to love thinking about dinner all the time.
Yeah.
Now my mum's from Malaysia, and Malaysia is such a melting pot for culture, and it's a melting pot for food as well. And food almost is, I would say, I don't think I would upset many Malaysian people by saying this, myself included in my family, that food is about 80% of the culture. We talk about food, we live food, we breathe food. And my mum was no different in that way. And she came over here in the 70s actually to come and work for the NHS. And she studied to become a nurse in Leeds. And she loved the culture. And my mum is quite naturally a friendly person. So, I mean, she's got a bigger social life than me, Charles. It's just quite something. She's just always out and about, and she's made friends. And she used to tell me that she used to make friends through food as well. So she would like make food for people, especially when language is a barrier. Food becomes a bit of a conversation starter. And yeah, she learned so many ways of how to cook her dishes here. And over the years, there's been more access to the ingredients that we need to cook something like a laksa, for example. And I grew up in this household of her just cooking all the time. She would just have a pot of something on the go, and there'd be something getting chopped away, always food from the day before. And I don't know if anyone listening will actually kind of recognize this, but there's these little, it's almost like these baskets that you put around food in Malaysia, and it's so the flies don't get it. So my mum would still have that in the kitchen, even though in Glasgow there's not many food flies because the weather's not that good. So I grew up with all of these kind of like dishes on the worktops with these like fly baskets over them. It was really sweet. And from thinking about food all the time, I just thought, I love cooking my friends' dinner. I love being around friends and food and that kind of social aspect. So I entered MasterChef in 2014. And that was a whirlwind. I mean, I was 24, if I was right in saying. So a while ago, I think I've still got in my head that I'm still 24, but I'm not. And it was great. And I just loved that pressure. Even the rounds where you did well, I loved it. And also the rounds where I didn't do well, I just had this kind of sadistic love for that pressure. I just thought it was great. So I came back up on the train. It was a buzz. Yeah, again, I got through to the quarterfinals and then came back up on the train to Glasgow, and I thought, I need to do something with this. So I started to write a little blog, I think slightly before the times of Instagram and Twitter. And I had a blog spot, actually. It was called Breakfast at Julie's. It was a very cute little kind of blog. And I mean, I think I'd probably cringe at it now if I look back. It'd be like one of those things that you look back in a diary. And I thought to myself, I can't be in this industry without and talk about it and write about it fluently without actually being in amongst it. So I quit my job and became a commie chef and washing dishes, scrubbing all the potatoes for a restaurant in Glasgow. And I just loved it. And I mean, the hours were hard. It was very full on, but what an experience it was. And that kind of train journey back up to Glasgow was the first point of starting into food. So it was a very it wasn't a planned route, shall we say. It was very much like, do you know what, let's give this a go and let's see what happens. And I've just loved every minute since.
It sounds like a real reflection point as well, that moment of contemplation on the train journey back up.
It really was. It was also with a bit of like a woe is me feeling, because I'd just been knocked out of MasterChef. And I thought I could really stick with this woe is me feeling and give it up, or I could actually just go and learn some more and get better at it. And that was the real turning point for me. I remember that training journey very well. So that was the real turning point.
And what would be the kind of from that? So you then you decided that you were going to make a career in food. You said you got a job as a commie chef. What's the kind of potted history that then followed to where you are now? I know we'll go on to explore some more of this and some of the as we chat further, but what's the sort of potted timeline?
So that was, I think that must have been in 2013 or 14. My timelines are slightly skewed now. So, but it was, nearly 10 years ago. And I remember going for a job, and I didn't know too much about the industry. I went for this interview with a lovely lady called Laurie McMillan, and she, and further down the story, giving spoilers here, she is my main mentor still to this day. And I had an interview with her, and it lasted, I think it was 2.5 or 3 hours. Like we spoke and spoke and spoke about food.
You know it's going well at that stage.
And I just thought she was amazing. And I didn't quite know that there wasn't a huge amount of people who it was a very male-dominated industry at that point, especially for the kind of higher up roles. And I didn't know that. I had no clue. So Laurie was my first experience she was my first boss kind of thing. And subsequently I had female bosses after that as well. And again, it took like a while to realize that that was the thing, because I just kind of entered into a world where the kind of norm wasn't what I was working within. And so it was a really nice way to enter that and kind of develop your confidence in that way, because you're around very fiery, fantastic women from the beginning. And it was fantastic. So I then worked there for a couple of years, and then I became a sous chef, I think, very quickly. And I loved that because I was with Laurie, and I just thought it was the best thing ever. I just was having the best time working with her. I thought I need to start working in the kind of cuisine that I'd like to. So I worked in a lovely place called Babu Kitchen, and that was a lovely little like Mumbai style street food place. But we did really things that weren't really in Glasgow. Lovely things like bel puri, which is like crispy rice and tamarind water, and it was amazing. So did that for a couple of years, and then I opened up a street food stall. And this is all quite a quick succession, this chunk. I remember just going, do you know what, just go for it. Just if it flops, it flops. You can go back and teach music again. And then I ended up opening up a street food stall, which was very successful. We had huge queues for lunch every day.
Amazing.
And it was down in Bin Lane. It was not the most glamorous, and Bin Lanes in Glasgow are not glamorous, I'll tell you that for something. But I loved it. It was fab. It was the kind of, and it reminded me of being in Malaysia and the hawker stalls, how you eat outside and it's so vibrant. And that kind of smell that you get from like seeing cooking and the steam coming out in the street and everything. I loved it. And that was the first real, so that was me, that was the point where I opened a business. That was me working for myself. And I think by that point I was 27, if I'm right in saying. So it was a 3-year phase of kind of doing stalls and things like that. And I absolutely loved it. And actually, Laurie had her first cafe. So Laurie, the woman at the beginning, I told you there was a spoiler coming. And she was my mentor. And she, by this point, she'd opened her own cafe. It was also going so well that she then wanted to move into a bigger premises. And we go out for dinner one night and she was like, why don't you move into my first place? And it was this tiny little, and she made an amazing place out of nothing. It was this tiny, like, it was the size of a living room. The kitchen was the size of a cupboard, and there was enough, I think, I mean, if you were at a push for 18 seats, and I'm talking like people would be nearly sitting on top of each other at that point. So so I opened there. It was lovely. It was a nice progression actually. And she really helped me with that opening. So it's just all these people that you don't quite realize at the time your life becomes so kind of important and such an inspiration. And that was my first restaurant. And then I had a really lovely pop-up in a space in Glasgow called SWG3, which was my first. Now I always talk about that because it was a bigger place, and that's when I had 2 businesses, and that's when things started to kind of ramp up a bit. Because we're going from just a street food stall to all of these things gradually. And it was really good fun. I absolutely loved it. It was in a huge space. There was about 78 covers. And I was running 2 businesses. So everything moved in a very quick succession. And I then, obviously the pandemic hit and changed things for everyone. But I sometimes want to make the conversation about that change one for good, actually. So actually, I think we turned the Kopitiam, which is my first restaurant, into a kind of takeaway. And now I've got one restaurant. It's called GaGa. It's bigger, and it's been a really nice progression to get to this stage of just having one place and loving it and developing on that, because the small one became too small. It was just too small. We needed to move.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about GaGa, and but I wanted to, and you've alluded to it in your introduction, of the proposition at GaGa obviously incorporates the your heritage, your and fuses kind of Malaysian cuisine and kind of Scottish. I guess the Scottish larder. How do they fuse, and what does that mean? Is fusion even a thing for you? What does that even mean for you?
You know what? Fusion is one of those words, I think, that got a bad rep. I think maybe rightly so. I think with our fusion, probably in the noughties, there was probably quite a lot of bad fusion that went on, and maybe not like respectful of the culture and the process of cooking it. And but it's a very, like, I find also with being someone who is mixed race, when I'm Scottish Malaysian, you want to be able to respect who you are, and the word kind of authenticity gets thrown into this conversation quite a lot. And I always think about the word authentic as itself. It's a really lovely word. It's great. It's like to feel your authentic self. You just feel you as who you are, and that is great. But when we apply that word into food, I feel this is where this conversation comes into play, where actually the word authentic is almost deemed by other people as to what is authenticity. So you've got things like for example, we have so many curries in Glasgow. We've got such a huge Asian population, and there's things like the tikka masala, which was born in Glasgow, but it is a delicious thing. It's just added some cream into it, and I think it's almost that way where there can be a beautiful fusion with that authenticity, because there is so much movement in the world right now. And I'm definitely not the only one to be mixed race or multiracial, actually, in like my kind of upbringing. And I believe that the word authenticity is to feel yourself, to go back to that, to feel who you are completely and authentically. And I think unapologetically as well. That's probably a very important thing about it. And we should apply that to food as well, because there is almost a thing where I was reading an article about this and it really did touch base, where we can be quite colonial about our ideas of authentic food, where actually authentic food can only be, if it's, for example, Malaysian, it can only be the garlic from that area, the herbs from that area, the fish from that area, which in actual fact, if we look at that, is not truly authentic anymore. If I was to fly all of those things over and cook that dish, I'm still cooking it in Glasgow. I'm not surrounded by the heat and everything else. So I believe that if we have that idea in GaGa of, we respectfully cook with Scottish ingredients and we use Malaysian techniques, and I respect the fact that actually I've traveled over to Malaysia every year and spent so much time there, and I respect that place and that part of me, and also having grown up here at the same time, you can then almost like have this beautiful new menu, this full new repertoire of dishes that is really respectful to both places. And that's what we're trying to achieve in GaGa. It's a very long-winded sentence rather than confusion.
It feels like respect is at the root of what you're saying. Being
Absolutely.
respectful in how that is talked about, presented, and the narrative that goes around it. It's anchored in respect. It's almost sort of like authenticity equals having respect at its core.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there is that thing with fusion where it can be so amazing if it is done respectfully. And I love that idea actually, because I think that I always talk about this, if you Google, I think it's in like some sort of Italian history recipe book, if you have a look at the first ragu recipe, it is so different from what we know and recognize as ragu. And ragu is something that people recognize all over the world. Italian cuisine, we can see that everywhere. There's no tomatoes in it. It is like a completely different thing. And I think, like, if I'm right in saying there was quite a lot of milk in it back in the day, and I love that idea of now it's quite a lot of us will see it as this rich kind of tomatoey sauce with slowly stewed meat, and it's kind of always done with pappardelle and things, but actually back in the day, a completely different thing. So if we take our ideas of food in that way and keep them so in tune to what we believe is authentic, we'll never progress and we'll never develop any new food. And I would love, and the conversation is coming up more and more actually, where there is so many of us cooking from different parts of the world. And I mean, for me, food connects me to Malaysia. It makes me feel like I'm there. I have the smells, I've got the kind of tastes and flavors. But I am not against using langoustines that I can catch here in Scotland with my laksa broth, rather than making it a prawn head broth and the prawns have been flown over from Vietnam.
I mean, I was going to ask you about how you go about adapting and evolving dishes to fit the local larder without, as you say, putting everything on a plane and flying it over. And are there some exceptions to that? But how do you go about localizing it to what the local larder is, but also having that respect piece in there?
We currently have a thing in Scotland where there's too many deer, so actually venison is probably up there, and one of the things that we are eating a bit more of and we want to try and use a bit more of. So for example, I'll try and do like a venison char siu bao, so rather than using pork, I will use venison. And actually what I found, and you know what, actually I'm saying this like it's my own recipe, I'm going to take that back, it's the Hairy Bikers. They're wonderful, they came to the restaurant and that's the dish that they cooked me, and I'm going, why have I never thought about using venison before? And it gets this like rich, gamey flavor, and it's just absolutely delicious. So there's switches like that. And we've also got things like I always have the prawn toast on the menu in Glasgow. And I think in GaGa it's one of probably it's our highest seller. Everyone loves prawn toast. And from quite chefy chefs, I've definitely had quite a lot of stick about that dish before in the past, but for me, that dish is so important because it represents actually like the idea of like in westernized cultures, we love bread. I love bread, it's amazing. And for me, that dish really symbolizes the Chinese takeaway,
Yeah,
which is such a huge part of the food fabric in the UK.
yeah,
And that dish is not, yes, it's not come from China, absolutely not, but it has come from people mashing up prawns together, having some floral ginger in there, some light soy and white pepper, and putting that into a sandwich and going, maybe that could be something that people eat here because I'm mixing the flavors that I know with this very simple thing, which is bread. And I'm going to try and sell that. And it has become one of the most iconic dishes on the Chinese takeaway thing. So for me, things like the prawn toast, which maybe don't have as much accolade in the kind of like cooking world, are really important to how we look at food.
yeah.
For me, I'll always have that dish on, no matter how many slaggings I get from chefy chefs. I'll have it on at all points.
And what's the basis of the, I guess, the narrative, the comment from chefy chefs? What, why call that out? Just because they feel that
Yeah.
why shouldn't it be there?
Well, again, this ties back to my original kind of thought process behind this. And I love, I mean, I love laughing in the face of food snobbery every day anyway, because I'm just not a food snob. I couldn't be, my mum would just have a go at me if I did. So it's often in the comments with things like prawn toast and things that you would recognize from a Chinese takeaway that it's like, oh, they're just doing prawn toast. They're not doing anything new. They're not doing anything like authentic and exciting. Probably, I imagine that person would love to see like a sambal, which we also have on the menu too. But
Yeah,
I love to have these things on there as almost a bit of a statement to be like, actually, yes, this I didn't reinvent the wheel by making prawn toast, but actually it is one of the most iconic dishes. It's delicious. It's got that crispy outside. You've got
yeah,
the kind of juicy prawns inside with the ginger and everything, and with like it cuts through with like a really nice vinegary chili dip as well. That is just for me absolutely amazing and a good symbol of how that kind of strength in immigration as well
yeah,
has made
yeah.
people move to different countries and start businesses up with not having the same language, not having the same food skills. So I love to have that on, and I love it even more when I get slagged for it. It will stay on forever. It makes me love the dish more and more because it's not fancy enough for some people, but it tells a story for me. So I love that.
I can almost taste it now with you describing it, and that.
Yeah.
I suppose
It
that,
becomes buttery when you put some sesame in there as well. And
yeah,
oh, the sesame
absolutely.
on the outside becomes like sesame butter almost when you
Yeah,
fry it. So
yeah,
it's delicious.
definitely. How does and that segues quite nicely actually into your kind of culinary style. How do you describe your culinary style?
I would describe it as the food the food that you like to eat when you're on holiday. So I would love it to be that moment of when it's nothing fancy. I have never owned a pair of tweezers in my life in a kitchen. I do not tweeze herbs. It's just not for me. And
Yeah,
it's fine for other people, but for me, I want people to come in and have that feeling of when you're on holiday and you're in a certain atmosphere and you have something as simple as it could be a really nice tiramisu, it could be a really nice stir-fried dish,
yeah,
something really simple, but the flavors are there and the kind of food and passion and history is in there too. So for me, I would love to describe my food as holiday food,
yeah.
if I could.
No,
In
brilliant.
the very
Feel
rainy
good.
Glasgow, but we'll try.
Yeah. And if you were to sort of step out of yourself and look at your culinary soul, I suppose, from the outside, what's going on in that culinary soul? What does it look like?
That's a really lovely question. You know that? I've never been asked. I think it's very nice. Well, I think about this quite a lot because the food is not technically that difficult. It's all about flavor and it's all about passion and love. And there's a method of cooking that we use in Malaysia, and it's called agak, and it just means so it's like say if I was showing you, Charles, how to make like a laksa, and I'd
Yeah,
be like, do you know what we need to add? a little bit more of salt in here. We need to add a little bit more of, you know, the kind of prawn headstock, or a little bit more chili. I'd probably, in my Glaswegian accent, I'd probably say give like a shuggle of the sauce in there, or like or just like a sprinkling of it. There's never really any real measurements, and I love that idea of that soulful cooking where you don't refine everything and actually you develop yourself as a cook through your senses. So I
Yeah,
think if I was to look at how I cook soulfully, that would be the way where you smell something, or if you
yeah,
like hear something sizzling too much, you turn it down, or if you taste it and you just, you know, when you look at things as well, how it's going to be cooked. So I always veer off of recipes, which makes me sometimes a very terrible baker.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I love just experimenting, and I love the process of developing a dish and making it your own as well. I'm writing a book just now actually as well, and I know there's so many minds that work very well with structured recipes, and the recipes will be in there and very structured, but I've actually put a test at the beginning of the book, and it's you make a salad dressing, and you use something sweet, you use something kind of sour like lime or
yeah,
lemon juice or vinegar, and you use something salty like fish sauce, or it could be even some tamari or salt itself. And you make this dressing and you try it at the end for your seasonings, because it's got all of the things in there that you could need, even a bit
yeah,
of heat from chili and physical heat as well, actually. So the actual temperature of that salad dressing when you bring it up to temperature, so you melt all the sugar. And something amazing happens. So when you cool something down like that, and you taste it once it's completely cooled, it will taste totally different to you. And I always use the description of when you have an ice cream that's melted, it's often too sweet at that point,
yes, yeah,
because when it's in its frozen state, it is
very true.
perfect. But when it's melted, it's too sweet. So that's the same thing with cooking as well. And I find that that simple recipe test always gets people thinking about food and their own palate, and makes them a bit more of an independent cook themselves. So I'm trying to spread the word with
No,
that.
that's described really, really beautifully. It feels quite, there are some principles in your culinary soul, but it feels quite, it's quite in the moment and quite kind of organic, and it builds as to how it feels and tastes, as rather than what it says on a piece of paper is right.
Yeah, and I think there's something about that way of leaving people. You can give people guidance, and that's what recipe books are for. And I've got recipe
Yeah,
books as well, which I love. But I'm not going to be able to be in everyone's kitchen with them cooking along. I would
yeah,
love to be. That would be my dream, to come over for dinner and show you how to make the perfect nasi goreng. But for moments where you are just a cook on your own, you maybe don't have that confidence. I want people to feel confident within the book. I don't want them to just rely on my book solely and have to flick to the page every single time they need it. I would love for people to learn cooking through growing a bit of like self-nourishment almost.
yeah,
You learn how to cook for you rather than for what every single book says. You learn to season for your own palate. And I believe that makes everyone a better cook at the end of the day, if you know what you love.
yeah, definitely. You've given us a few little teasers of dishes in our discussion so far, but if you were to think about your repertoire, what would your kind of top 5 hits be in terms of dishes, and of course why?
I have, goodness me, I mean I love food so much. I eat more than what my body size can hold. So I this is a good question for me. And I actually, do you know what, Charles, I wrote it down because I thought I could end up saying about 15 here. So my top 5 would be, my number 1 of all time is a Malaysian dish. It's actually Malaysia's national dish, and it's called nasi lemak. And nasi just means the rice, and
Yeah,
lemak is this funny word. It means almost like rich and fatty and like delicious. So which that represents the coconut element of that.
okay,
And nasi lemak is had most of the time for breakfast, and if you were to have it as its kind of plain self, it comes in very many forms. So what I love about it is there's so many things around it. I'll start. So we've got the coconut milk rice in the middle, and it's infused with pandan. And pandan's this like amazing herb that has got a really, it's, you can't replace it with anything. It's got this like gorgeous savory vanilla flavor that it just permeates the rice and it makes it fantastic. So it gets cooked with that, and you normally have a boiled egg with it, or you can have a fried egg and some sambal in there. Now, sambal is one of my favorite things in the world. It's that really lovely Malaysian, Indonesian chili paste.
Yeah.
And I normally have that with the ikan bilis. Now, ikan bilis is dried anchovies and peanuts as well. So the dried anchovies become like little crisps almost, and the peanuts are just, they're amazing. They're bread skins. Yeah, they're, oh my God, they're delicious. They're really good bar snack. And then you sometimes have some cucumber on the side, so that's just for the kind of cooling element of it. There's a thing called achar pickle as well, which is a lovely, I would say, I don't think I would offend anyone by saying this is like Malaysia's answer to kimchi. It can be fermented, but it's not always fermented, but you see it on the side of dishes so much. And it's just delicious. It's lovely. And then sometimes you can have a bit of curry on the side, or fried chicken, or even fried tofu. So it's very adaptable, and it comes in a banana leaf, and all of these flavors amalgamate. But even with all these big punchy flavors around the middle, it's the coconut milk rice in the middle that is just, it's phenomenal. It carries all of these things.
Yeah, the carrier,
yeah. So that's my number one. Number two would also, I'm sticking to Malaysia here for this because it's just phenomenal. And there's a great roti stall in London actually called Roti King. But which leads me to number two, which is roti canai. And again, also a breakfast dish. And it's a lovely buttery flatbread that you dip into curry sauce, or you can have a dal, or you can have it with cheese. Actually, it's seen quite a lot with cheese. And I just love it. It's crispy, it's fluffy. It's just, every time you have it, it's just undeniably good. I think actually Lewis Hamilton said that was his favorite thing about Kuala Lumpur recently. And I imagine he's been there a lot with the wrestling, so it is fantastic.
Versatile one. Number two. Number three?
Number three, actually, I'm going to mention a dish which I've mentioned before, which is actually ragu. I think that there's something about that dish that it's just, I just absolutely adore it. I think the time that goes into it and the variations actually of it that you get, it's so different from place to place. And there's something so comforting about it. I think I remember going to Tuscany actually with my friends, and they have I think it's called, oh goodness, is it chingali? I think it's wild boar, and they have a wild boar ragu. And I ate that outside in Tuscany with friends over some really nice wine in a place called Montalcino, which is quite close to Montepulciano, which is where everyone knows wine for. Montalcino is beautiful. That was one of those holiday moments.
Really sticky and rich, and
and the time and love that goes into it, and the fact that it's simmered away for hours, but there's nothing complex really that goes in there, but it just has this magical effect on everyone where you just kind of sink into a bowl of ragu. So I love it for that. That's one of my favorites. And I thought about the fourth one because I'm a bit more of a savory person than I am sweet. So the fourth one was quite a good thing. And I love, I don't think I could live this life without having a big bowl of broth. I just love, I love broth so much. So I love actually even just Vietnamese phoes. Like I love them. I think they're amazing. And I think if I look back at all these dishes, they're all quite comforting. They're all about. I was
just about to say there's a comfort.
Yeah, definitely. And nothing fancy about any of them. But I just absolutely love having sometimes it's the only thing that will fix me if I am feeling a bit tired, or God, I mean, it's great if you've had a couple of glasses of wine before. It's just that soul nourishing thing. And I believe that you can get that from food. I think there must be something about the psyche of having food that makes you feel fantastic. I don't know if it's got the right kind of, I don't know, components in it to make your body actually change. But for me, it's all about the mind for that. And I just love that. So that would definitely be number four.
Maybe the rituals about how you consume it as well. Maybe use a spoon or drink something that you hold close to your face.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, do you know what? I mean, all of my dishes are not served on any fancy plates, which I mean, the first one is a newspaper and banana leaf. And then number 5 is actually I just love tiramisu. I
Yeah.
just absolutely
Yeah.
adore tiramisu. It's so simple.
You've completed the comfort theme there for
I
sure.
really have, yeah, it's all about comfort food.
Yeah.
And oh, Charles, like I love the ones that you get from, again, like beautiful places in Italy. I mean, I had a beautiful tiramisu in Rome. But I also am so delighted if somebody brings me over the supermarket bought tiramisus. Like I love them from that sliding scale. So I would be happy with
Yeah.
Tesco tiramisu and also the one that you get in Italy and everything in between. So for me, that's a really good test of a dish. If
Yeah.
you can love it in its
Normal
worst form.
disguises. Yeah.
Right. But you
Brilliant.
can love it in its purest form too.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for that. That's brilliant. Really super interesting. Well,
Thank you.
you mentioned it in your introduction. I wanted to ask you a little bit about MasterChef and TV and
Yeah.
what did that do for you? I guess in terms of your profile, but I guess at a bit of a deeper level as well.
So MasterChef that was the first time I'd ever done TV in my life. And I loved it. I also went down I had the blunder moment on TV very early on. So that was quite good. It's good to get these things out of the way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I joined oh goodness, I joined the graveyard of the desserts not going well. So I think we talk about this. There's a MasterChef fan group, and I joined that graveyard very early on, but managed to save it, so that's quite all right. I was the chocolate fondants, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I loved that, and I then started doing some recipes for a local channel so there's ITV and we've got STV in Scotland. And there was a really fun show called Tea for a Tenner.
Okay.
And we used to have to come in, make tea for £10. And I just loved it. I thought it was really fun because, again, I love like the social aspect of
Yeah.
food. And I love to cook for people. And I think that comes kind of hand in hand with TV sometimes. Again, but if I could put it back even further, I think it started off with my mum making friends through food. I think that I really got that love from her, actually, of inviting people around and kind of expressing your love through food. So the TV career kind of kicked off then, and I did a 2-part series on STV called Julie and Jimmy's Hot Walks. And I am so glad because there's something about I love admitting at points in my life where I wasn't as good as something as I wanted to be, because I don't think people talk about that enough. And Jimmy Lee, he's a wonderful chef in Glasgow, actually. We had never really done TV before. We'd had no formal training, and all of a sudden we're hosting a TV show, and I loved it. It was really good fun. Don't get me wrong, there was moments where, like, when you look back at your early work when you in any field and you cringe a little bit and you go, oh my goodness, but luckily I'm not that easily embarrassed. So continued on with that, and I've just loved doing TV ever since. We had the fortune of having the Hairy Bikers come into my first restaurant, actually, and that was like a real turning point for me. They say that you should never meet your heroes, but they are both wonderful. Si and Dave are just the nicest people, and they exceeded my expectations. They were just wonderful. So they came in, we had a great time filming, and since then I've been starting to do quite a lot more work in TV, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are fantastic. They are almost like the uncles of the food world. They're just, the people that you want to be around. I think especially with my style of cooking, where I'm not about kind of fine dining, I'm about flavour and the love of food itself. They're very much the same in that way.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, absolutely. That's very much their style. It's about how it feels, and it's a bit more rooted in emotion and those types of things as opposed to precision.
Yeah, and they can bring a smile on each other's faces through food, and I just love that. I love watching them cook for each other. We went to a lovely kind of stately manor in Scotland, and they cooked me dinner, which was amazing. And I just loved seeing them cook for each other. That's one of the joyous moments of my life, of watching them do that and how much they enjoy each other's company. and they're very funny. They're very funny. I was laughing all day long. So it was just a nice giggly day with food and the hairy bikers.
That sounds perfect. That sounds perfect. And I suppose, and kind of leading on, really, because it sounds like they are, in to an extent, they've had an influence on what you've done, and there's perhaps a mentoring role. But who are those key mentors in your career, and what I suppose what are some of the big lessons that you've taken from those mentorships? If that's a word.
That's a really good question. I think so. My first, I guess, culinary mentor was Laurie McMillan, my first head chef. She was fantastic. She taught me how to be giggly in a kitchen in the face of hardship, and that is such a big strength. I'm still really grateful for that. So people teach you how to be calm, and people teach you how to kind of get through the storm, but nobody teaches you how to have a laugh when it's really hard, and it weirdly has this effect on people.
Well, it gets you through, doesn't it? That's so important.
Gets you through. I actually I spoke to, now I'm sure some people will have heard of her. She's called Pam Brunton from Edinburgh Restaurant, and she's the head chef and owner. And she, I mean, Edinburgh's just been awarded many Michelin accolades. I think also had the Green Michelin Award as well. And the food is fantastic. It's one of the best restaurants in Scotland. Now, I met her, and we're both very small people, we're height-wise, and she's smaller than me, but her laugh is just amazing. And we had a conversation about laughing in a kitchen, and she's also one of my mentors, actually. I always look up to her because she's just leading the way, and whenever we meet, we just have such a big giggle. And she's worked in some of the most fancy restaurants in London, very kind of like high pressure, but Pam just giggled, and we had a good conversation about the power of enjoying your job and making people feel at ease around you by having a giggle.
Yeah.
So those two definitely have kind of brought that into my personality as well. And not to take yourself too seriously. That's probably another lesson that they give you.
And so important in such a high pressure environment, long hours. It's often unsociable.
Definitely.
You've got to be able to laugh, haven't you?
Yeah, and we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And there's no better way than to make a mistake and laugh it off for yourself and be like, do you know what? That was a bit silly, wasn't it?
Some of the best laughs I've had have been in kitchens, actually.
Yeah, definitely. It's got that really like family atmosphere.
Definitely. Can you tell us a little bit more about GaGa and the restaurant that you now have? What is the vibe? What is it you're setting out to create? What's the kind of food offer? Some of those kind of foundational dishes. What's GaGa all about?
So GaGa is all about, I've called it a late night Malaysian diner.
Yeah.
And the reason of that, because it's not to be too fancy. It's actually, you can come in if you live upstairs and you can't be bothered cooking that night and you're not going to get dressed up, totally fine. Come in, enjoy some food on your own, that's fine. Or if you want to come in and you want to have a big kind of celebration with your friends. So GaGa is all about showing what Malaysian food is and Southeast Asian food with that kind of movement in mind, and not being afraid to cross culture cuisine. Actually, that's a phrase that I use quite a lot to kind of show that within the restaurant. And we're very big on the interiors in there as well, actually. And I don't mean that as in it's had a big fancy £1 million fit out. We had a very small budget, and we have kept all the kind of original features, actually. And that's often a comment that we get quite a lot when people go to the restaurant is it just looks so nice in here and it feels so nice. And that is really on purpose, because there's something about whenever you have your nicest meal, it's never going to be on a plane. It's never going to be like in a kind of clinical place. I just love the atmosphere for people as well. So, and again, it's not too stuffy. I think quite a lot of the trinkets that we bought from there from the charity shop next door. And it gives it a bit of charm, actually, even some of the prints that we've got up on the wall. And yeah, so it's all about that. And then we've also got a kind of booze side of it. I went very Glasgow there, booze side. So we've got really good cocktails in there. My business partner, Fraser, worked in an amazing place called Sweet Liberty in Miami.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
And he came back.
There's a thing or two about cocktails.
Yes, he knows a thing or two, and they're delicious. They're great. And he's paired up his techniques with the flavors. So there's a really nice cocktail offering again, and I think there's something nice about making cocktails accessible where there's not all these fancy things, and just making it simple for people really. And there's three of us, my other business partner. We make sure that, I mean, we're so lucky, we've got the nicest team in the world. They're so good at their job. They know exactly what we're trying to do. And we try and make sure that actually between the kitchen, the front of house, and everything that runs, that everyone works together. There's not a divide there where we have they're just a brilliant team. So yeah, between the three of us, we've got this lovely kind of hub, and it's quite big inside. It means that you can kind of relax and sit around for hours if you like. So yeah, it's a place of food and love, to summarize that. And cocktails.
That sounds a place you want to be.
Oh, thank you.
And I suppose it feeds on quite nicely from that, talking about food and hospitality at a slightly deeper level. Can you tell us a little bit about your why? Obviously, you clearly you want to be successful, you want to run a successful business, but what drives you? What does success look like, and what's your kind of deeper why? Why do you do it?
That's also, you've got great questions. I'm really delighted to be on this podcast. It's some of the best I've been asked. I think with this, success is like for everyone a completely different look, because sometimes it can look like finance for people, sometimes it can look like a promotion for people, and I think actually whenever I think about why I'm doing this, it's often to keep on like challenging myself. And there's quite a lot of like self-nurture in there, because I've been so lucky to find a career that I actually really love cooking, and I love people, and I love being able to talk about it. And within that, I'll always, because there's definitely parts of my job, just like everyone else, that is hard. I mean, running a restaurant is hard. And for me, it's all about finding the balance of still being able to do those hard things, but keeping your head okay, and having time to kind of see friends and family and feel yourself. Now, I think the way that I work, it's very much like a lifestyle career where it's all consuming, and it's something that I'll do I work most days actually, but it doesn't feel like that. So I don't really moan about it in that way. It's more like I love to do it. So for me, the why quite often is quite a personal thing, because I obviously learned through my mum, and I love reading about people's bravery and movement. I'm obsessed with people. I think people are amazing. I think that it's something that will keep me going in this career. And I watched my mum move over here. God, she was only 18 and she couldn't speak the language, and she was so brave, and she did that, and she made loads of friends. And this is at the point where the internet wasn't really a thing. So I mean, I was even thinking, I was like, how were the bus journeys for her to get from university to her flat, and all of these things. So I think within that, there's so much bravery that is untold. So I've set out on this journey to kind of tell her story as well. And through that, I've learned quite a lot about myself, about being mixed and respecting both heritage, and kind of, I guess, growing from there. So it's been a very like personal thing. And I think there's something about having that passion for the journey, for it being so personal to you, really gives you quite a lot of energy, gives you a good feel boost to get up in the morning and go and do it. So, yeah, that's
thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I've got a couple of questions to close up. And this one is slightly unfair because it's such a massive topic, but clearly our food system is at a huge inflection point with topics like, you know, ultra processed foods and things like sustainability and that impact on the environment and human health and obesity and all these kind of different things. From your perspective, how do you think our food system needs to change?
That is, I mean, you're right, actually, there's so many topics that need to change. I face this on a daily basis because I try and remain as conscious about food as possible. So things like Veganism. I actually like I will eat far less meat now than I ever used to. And because I think that that's important for me, and I'll constantly monitor how I feel in that. Another kind of hard-hitting one that I talk about a lot is actually food waste.
Yeah.
I work with Love Food, Hate Waste Scotland actually on spreading the message about food waste and what we can do with it. And I try and create recipes that will, use up the rest of like your kind of. I've actually got a jar of pickles with the brine just left in it, and I'm going, do you know what? I'll show people how to make a good salad dressing out of that. There's like ways you can do
Yeah.
that. Um, I think also cost of living as well, whilst we're looking at sustainability. This is one for me that I struggle with, and I will always try and campaign for better in that way. And I mean, I think it's really good to give your honest opinion. And for me, that's a really broken system because you have amazing shops like that have zero waste packaging, and it's all about kind of using paper bags, and the air miles on the fruit and veg are far less, but often that comes with a price tag.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fair because actually you do need to put in a bit more to make these kind of smaller supermarkets and things work. But for me, sustainability needs to be for everyone, and it's a really hard conversation to have when actually it's a lot cheaper to buy unsustainably. And
Yeah.
it doesn't bring me any judgment to people. There's a bigger problem
Yeah.
in the kind of higher realms that's harder to deal with. So for me, again, when you start to think about this, the problem comes from here and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I always think that in your daily life, you have to do as much as you can to make these things a little bit better. And I know everyone says that, but it can even be from like you figured out a way to use your carrot peelings that you made lentil soup with into a nice vegetable fritter,
Yeah.
or you substituted out oyster mushrooms or mushrooms for some chicken in a stir fry kind of thing. I think there's a real responsibility actually with people like me, actually with chefs that are doing books, that are doing recipe work, that are doing TV work as well, that actually like we really need to make our small changes like within the book that I'm writing. If I have got a recipe that has got a leftover substitute, I'm linking people to the next page to be like, this is where you can use that recipe kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is up to people like me to have a bit more of like a voice and show what it is that we're doing every day to try and make that easier. Because I think long gone are the days when you'd have these amazing recipes that you would, I don't know, utilize a very small part of like a lobster for something.
Yeah.
God, I've seen so many lobster tail recipes, and I'm going, what's everyone going to do with the rest of the lobster? That's a huge waste. So it really is up to us to try and make sure that that is a full circle in terms of food waste. And all of these things contribute to everyone's everyday lives and how we feel it and how we spend in the supermarkets and what our weekly food bill is as well. So
And
there's
it's a slightly it's a question that kind of comes out of that really is that you feel that obligation to do that. Is that something that you communicate or try and communicate to the diner, or do you just actually that's your thing, you kind of take it offline, they expect you to do that, or actually do you try and kind of educate as well if there's a dish that's, I don't know, made with this, or
Yeah, I mean, we even down to the kind of very, even if you, I think, say for example, Charles, if you came in for dinner and you're in Glasgow and you've ordered slightly too much food. Now, it's quite often that people will take away doggy bags, but we often get people saying, oh, I'm going to the pub after this. I don't really want to take like all of this food there. So we've started to do things like train the staff to say, well, actually, say that diner, we've got fridge space, so we can leave it here for you. So tomorrow morning, when you're feeling a bit hungover, you can come back and pick it up, and that's for you. And I think even like those small conversations gets people to thinking that it's like we're all really trying here, and actually, like once you're involved in that, and it doesn't have to be big. Almost like naggy sentences. It's like, okay, what can we do to help you? Because we're all in this together. So you've maybe ordered too much food. Let's fix it together, kind of thing.
Brilliant.
Very small things like that that I think really do make a difference.
My last question to you, I'm sure you would admit you've appeared in so many recent kind of ones to watch lists?
Oh, that's so nice. Very
It's a
overwhelming.
slightly well, it's a slightly provocative question, because then what is next for you and GaGa, and what are some of those exciting ones to watch future projects?
Oh, that's very nice. You know, it never doesn't get overwhelming. I think I will always be like, oh, really? Are you sure? So no, it's been really nice to see that coming in actually. And for me, the next steps are started to obviously write my book, which is something that I wanted to do for a long time. And that will be, I'll be in the house a lot making recipes over the next while. So that's gonna be my main feature. And GaGa itself is like, it's running absolutely amazingly. And for me, it's important to have somewhere where I can build stuff up through GaGa. So for example, work with anyone who maybe wants to like open their own restaurant, or they've got an idea that they want to purvey in GaGa. So for me, that's a really important part of that, is working with the people in there. And I think that inevitably will build GaGa as a restaurant and as a brand itself. So that's the way to do it. It's never like I don't think I'd ever open 6 restaurants in a month kind of thing. I'm never going to be that kind of person. And then with TV, actually, I've been really enjoying doing that. It's almost like having a kind of career developing. So I worked with BBC last year and presented a programme called the BBC Food Fest, and that was fantastic. Really lovely co-presenters, Leila Kazim, and also had, God, everyone was on it, absolutely everyone, but it was a fantastic, and I went over Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland too, so love that programme. And I'll be doing a wee bit more work on TV too. So I think it's almost like managing all of these things and accepting that I don't have the 9-to-5 career where it's just one thing that you do every day. But I do quite like that. And the goals for me are always to kind of push people up around me, because you also, there's so many opportunities out there for everyone. So I'm always looking to see like who could be my like co-presenter for a podcast, or who could I present something with, or who could I, and I just think that's the nicest way to work. So for me, the work has never stopped coming, because I also give myself work to do when I'm like, okay, how can I make this person's career go really fast? What can we do here in the kitchen kind of thing? So yeah, lots to do in that sense, but a very kind of varied pool of things that I'm doing over the next year.
Well, and that aligns really beautifully with your why as well, which is keeping everything in that balance as well. But I feel like I could talk to you all day, but time is.
I know, we can get a pint the next time we're together, Charles, and we can go through all of these problems together.
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, I have to bring this episode of the Food People in Conversation to an end. But I really wanted to thank you on behalf of the Food People and the In Conversation with audience for joining me today and sharing your story so honestly and openly and vulnerably. It's been a real eye-opener and an absolute joy to talk to you. So thanks so much.
Thank you, and thank you for the wonderful questions. It's my privilege to be on the podcast. I've been following it for years, so thank you very much. Very much appreciate it.
So do join our TFP community for the details of our latest In Conversation with episodes, as well as the latest free-to-access food and drink trends foresight. Visit thefoodpeople.co.uk and complete your details at the footer of the page to join our community. On behalf of Julie and myself, thanks for listening to the Food People in Conversation with. Joining with us in the trends of today and the foresight of tomorrow to shift the future of food and drink. And as always, I'd like to leave you with one question, which is, how are you shifting the future of food and drink? Thanks for listening.